guys doing good today? We're moving on 5.7, which is going to be called geometric mean. So basically we're taking a concept, we're going to be applying it to some right triangles to help us to find some missing sides of a right triangle. Let's jump into it. All right, so the first thing we're going to look at is something called the altitude rule. So right now, basically what's happening is you're given a whole right triangle. So if you look here, if I can get this thing to work, the right triangle is going to be shown on the outside here. I'm tracing it. So this is my right triangle all the way on the outside. And basically what's happening is a altitude is being drawn straight down on the hypotenuse side of this. So this is going to be the altitude. And so what happens is on the altitude rule, whenever we're trying to find the altitude, this is the rule. It says the altitude of the hypotenuse, so here's the hypotenuse of a right triangle, divides the hypotenuse into two segments. So those two segments would be AD and DB right here. Divides it into two segments. The length of the altitude is something called the geometric mean of these segments. And basically what that means is whenever I set these two triangles up as a proportion, I then can use the altitude as a geometric mean between the two. So basically I can cross multiply and solve here. So on this, if we look, I have a small triangle right here. So if we look, AD is the small side and D to C is the small side of this triangle. So that's why I would put those together, okay? And then when I end up drawing this ratio here, I would end up cross multiplying and solving. I'll put it into context whenever we end up going through the examples here in a second, okay? All right, so let's look at my leg rule. So on the leg roll, we're not finding the altitude anymore. Whenever we're talking about legs, we're talking about the two legs of my big triangle. So it says the altitude of the hypotenuse of a right triangle divides the hypotenuse into two segments. So the same thing as earlier. The length of each leg of the original right triangle is the geometric mean of the length of the entire hypotenuse and the segment of the hypotenuse adjacent to that leg. So like right now, if I wanted to find this leg right now, so AC, okay? I would end up taking, this is actually the hypotenuse of this smaller triangle. So the hypotenuse of, the hypotenuse of my big triangle and the hypotenuse of my smaller triangle would go over each other. Then I'm gonna set that equal to, and if we look on my smaller triangle, I have my little leg here, which is AD, and then the little leg of the big triangle is actually the hypotenuse of that smaller triangle. So that's why those would go over each other. So I'd end up cross multiplying and solving there and end up giving me a missing side length there, okay? So I'm gonna take these two concepts, figure out what I'm trying to find, and I'm gonna apply them to my examples, okay? So here we go. All right. So on example number one, what I'm actually gonna do is I'm gonna break this up a little bit more so you guys can see it a little bit better. So whenever this altitude is drawn right here, I technically create three different triangles. I have my big triangle, I have my medium triangle, and I have a itty bitty triangle here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna draw these and I'm gonna redraw all three of them out and I'm gonna show you how the ratios work that way. So here we go. So first I'm gonna draw my big triangle. So I'm gonna draw the big triangle kind of in the same direction here, okay? I'm gonna draw my medium triangle. And then I'm gonna draw a little bitty triangle over here so we can see what's going on here, okay? So if we look here, if I look at my big triangle, obviously my little leg, my shortest leg is gonna be X, my middle leg is gonna be Y, and my entire hypotenuse right here is gonna be 9 plus 1, which is gonna be 10, okay? Now looking at the medium triangle, which is gonna be this guy, this is where my right angle is. Opposite of that is my hypotenuse. So my hypotenuse is Y, okay? And then on this triangle, my long leg is gonna be 9. And then I actually don't know what my altitude is, so I don't know what that is, okay? Now on my little bitty triangle, my hypotenuse opposite the right angle is my X value. And then my little leg here, which is gonna be 1, okay? And so right now what I'm gonna do is, on this one I'm trying to solve for Y, so I'm gonna compare it to my big triangle. And on this one I'm trying to find X, which I'm gonna compare it to my triangle here. So let's go ahead and look at this. So let's go ahead and solve for Y first, okay? So right now Y is my hypotenuse. On the big triangle, my hypotenuse is 10. So I'm gonna do Y over 10 because those are my two hypotenuses, okay? On the medium triangle, my other measurement is gonna be 9. which is going to be my long leg. And the long leg on my big triangle is going to be y here. So y goes right there. So right now when I'm talking about geometric mean is the same numbers are going to show up on the top and bottom right here. So when I cross multiply, I'm going to end up having to square something here, okay? So y times y is going to give me y squared. 9 times 10 is going to give me 90. And then I'm going to take the square root of both sides. So technically speaking, there is not a square root of 90, but what I can do is I can actually reduce that, okay? So 9 is going to go into 90 10 times. So 9 square root 10. The square root of 9 is going to be 3. So your final simplified answer is going to be 3 square root 10. And then I can actually end up typing that into the calculator and finding a decimal here. So that's going to be my value of y. So now let's go ahead and find the value of x. So right now, this triangle over here, I'm looking for the value of x, okay? So again, x is my hypotenuse to the big triangle. I have x right here, but the hypotenuse is 10. So I'm going to do x over 10, okay? And then on this triangle right here, my little leg is 1, so I'm going to put 1 on top, and my big leg is going to be x. So right there, if we look, I have my geometric mean again, so I'm going to cross multiply. So x times x gives me x squared. 1 times 10 gives me 10. I'm going to take the square root of both sides, and there's actually not a square root of 10, and it can't be reduced. So your simplified answer would be square root of 10. Now again, I could square root that in the calculator and get a decimal measurement, okay? But I'm just going to leave it that way. All right, let's skip over to number 2. All right, on example number 2, I have 2 problems again, but on this one, on the previous one, I was finding 2 different legs. On this one, I'm actually going to be finding the altitude, and I'm going to be finding a leg. So let's go ahead and put this into work here. And so I like to break it up into 3 different ones, but on this one, I'm not going to do that, okay? So let's go ahead and look at this. So right now, if we look, I'm trying to find y. If we look, I have my altitude, which is drawn right here, and it's being shared by this triangle right here and this triangle right here. So there's going to be something that's going to tie together with both of those. So I'm going to be using y twice. That's that geometric mean I've been talking about. Okay, so right now let's just go and look at the small triangle. So right now with my small triangle, I have my long leg, which is y. And then now look at my medium triangle. My long leg is going to be 6. So y and 6 go together, okay? So on my little triangle, I have my short leg, which is going to be 2. And now if you look, the little leg of my medium triangle is going to be y. So y goes on bottom. So right there, there's my geometric mean again. So y and y give you y squared. 6 times 2 gives you 12. Take the square root of both sides. Your final answer would be the square root of 12, but we want to simplify that answer. 4 is going to go into 12 3 times, so I'm going to break it up. So square root 4, square root 3. The square root of 4 is 2, so 2 square root 3 is actually going to be your final simplified answer. Now again, I'm going to keep saying it. You could type that in the calculator, click enter, and it'll give you a decimal, and then you could round up going that way if that's what it asked for, okay? So now let's go ahead and solve for x. So up there on x, if we look, x is a part of the big triangle, but also x is also a part of my medium triangle. So I'm going to be comparing those pieces and plugging them to find what x is, okay? So let's go with that. So right now, look at the big triangle. X on the big triangle is actually going to be my long leg. So I'm going to put x as my long leg, okay? Now, this is a part of my medium triangle right now. The long leg of my medium triangle is going to be 6, correct? Okay? So now if we look on my medium, Yes, okay? Now on my medium triangle right here, opposite of that 90 degrees is going to be x. That's my hypotenuse. I'm stupid. Okay, x goes on bottom because 6 is going to be my long leg on my medium one. X goes on bottom because that's my medium triangle. Now the hypotenuse of the big triangle is going to be 8, so 8 goes on top. So 6 times 8 is going to end up being 48. X times x gives you x squared. I'm going to take the square root of both sides here, so this cancels. So x is going to end up being square root of 48, which there's not a perfect square on 48, but I'm going to see which one of those is going to end up being divided into it. So 16 will actually go into 48 3 times. So this is going to turn into square root of 16, square root of 3. Square root of 16 is going to turn into 4 square root 3. So that's going to be my simplified answer for x. So again, I'm going to go ahead and say it. I could type that in, could get my decimal, and then plug that in, okay? If it asks for a decimal there, okay? So let's switch over to example number 3. All right, so on example number 3 here, all we're doing is finding x. So if we look here, x is going to be a leg, but also if you look, I'm given the altitude here. So with that being said, I'm going to end up using the altitude rule here to find this, okay? So with that being said, if we look, my long leg of my medium triangle is x. The long leg of my smaller triangle is 10. The little leg of my medium triangle is going to be 10. And the little leg of my smaller triangle is going to be 4. Cross multiply, solve for x. So 4 times x gives me 4x. 10 times 10 gives me a hundo. Divided by 4 means x is going to end up being 25. And again, 10 is going to be that geometric mean there, okay? Just by breaking it up. Again, if you wanted to break these up, you could into 3 different triangles, but I'm just leaving it this way and making it work that way, okay? Now let's go and look at example 4. All right, lastly on example number 4, it looks like we're given the 2 situation again, where y is going to be my altitude, so I'm going to use the altitude rule there, and then x is going to be my leg, so I'm going to use the leg rule there. So let's go ahead and roll this out. So let's go ahead and solve for y first. So right now, if you look, y, this line right now is being shared by the smaller triangle and the medium triangle, okay? So I'm going to be comparing those two together. So right now, y is going to be the long leg of my smaller triangle. The long leg of my medium triangle is going to be 14, okay? Y is on the same triangle as 6. So I'm going to put 6 on top. And then if you look, 6 is going to be the short leg. The short leg of my medium triangle is going to be y. So y is going to go on bottom right here, okay? So y times y gives me y squared. 14 times 6 is going to end up giving me 84. Okay. And then I got to take the square root of both sides. So y is going to end up being square root of 84. But this will actually break down. 4 will go into 84 21 times. Okay. Take the square root of 4 gives me 2, square root 21. So that's going to be my final answer in radical form. Okay. Now let's go ahead and solve for x. I'm going to get a different color. Let's do blue, and I'll actually solve it over here. So if we look here, x is belonging to the smaller triangle, and it's also belonging to my big triangle. So we're going to compare those two. So right now in my smaller triangle, x is going to be my hypotenuse. The hypotenuse of the big triangle is going to be 14 and 6, which is 20. Okay? The only other measurement on this triangle is going to be on the smaller triangle 6, which is the short leg. So 6 is going to go on top. And if we look at the big triangle, my short leg here is going to be x. So there goes your geometric mean again. X and x will give you x squared. 6 times 20 is going to give you 120. Take the square root of both sides. So x is going to end up being, so the square root of 120 is going to turn out to be square root of 4, square root of 30. The square root of 4, this is going to turn into 2. So your final answer would be 2 square root 30, which again, you could type that in the calculator and click enter and get a decimal if it's asking for the decimal form there, okay? So again, if this is getting a little too confusing for you guys, break it up into 3 different triangles and then look at the vision that way, okay? That way you can then compare the sides and work that way. If you have any questions, please ask, because this can get confusing pretty quickly, okay? Good luck on your skill check.